Then I told the people, I said, people of Haiti, there are hundreds of witch doctors here tonight. And I said, you've come to kill me. You say, how do I know this? I said, because the living God told me. Now, this is no fooling. That platform was filled with dignitarians, because when you're invited by the dictator, they're all there. Place was filled with senators, full gospel businessmen, Demas Shakarian were all on the platform. And I said, God, the living God, has told me that you've come here tonight to kill me. I said, now I know exactly where you are and who you are. And I started to point them out. $300 of them. And I said, tonight we're going to find out whether the devil that you serve or the God that I serve has more power. And I turned around to the senators and the wives sitting there with their little white babushkas on their head, trying to act like they were Catholic. And I turned around and I said to them, I said, before all of these dignitaries, I said, I will not be responsible. I said, open your mouth. One more time. And I said, I will not be responsible when they carry you out of this meeting dead. You could hear a pin drop. Not a soul moved. Not one person spoke. And I preached for 20 minutes, and all of a sudden, in the back of the stadium, somebody let out a scream. And they took a little baby, a little child, looked like 4 or 5 years of age, and they started to push it over the heads of the people until they got it down to the front of the platform. And I looked at my interpreter and I said, what's happening? And he said to me, Brother Cerullo, somebody shouted way in the back there that this little child, this little baby, while you were preaching, who was born totally blind, all of a sudden began to reach around in the arms of the person that was holding them, the mother and the father, and began to see. And the blindness is gone. The little child is perfectly healed. And he said that they just threw the baby up here because they didn't know what else to do with it. Now, I got the mother and the father through the crowd. And when we got them through the crowd, and they stood there with their blind baby, perfectly healed, perfectly healed, perfectly healed. The general behind me stood up. And I can see him to this day with all of his uniform of war. And he put his hands on his head like this and he said, scream. He said, my God. He said, that's my neighbor. We stayed in Haiti for 3 solid weeks, night and day, morning service, afternoon service, evening service. It took only 2 weeks, and we shut the Mardi Gras down. because there was nobody in the streets. They were all in the crusade getting saved. Somebody say authority. This new level of strategic prayer that will penetrate the darkness has to be anointed with divine spiritual authority that gives power to our words that we speak.